Welcome to the deep dive. We're plunging into, well, what makes us who we are? How does personality actually form? And what invisible scars do our earliest relationships leave behind? Scars that really shape our identity. Today, we're taking a deep dive into borderline personality disorder, BPD, but we're not just defining it. We're exploring it through this really profound lens of developmental psychology and object relations theory. Our sources are, frankly, incredibly insightful. They're drawn from academic research, clinical perspectives, offering you a real shortcut to understanding this often misunderstood subject. So, our mission today, to unpack how those crucial early developmental experiences, especially within the parent-child relationship, how they contribute to the development of BPD and what that truly means for understanding the disorder. Okay, let's unpack this.
Yeah, and what's fascinating here is how these theories, which can seem pretty abstract, actually connect directly to the real lived experiences of individuals. Understanding that developmental journey is absolutely key. It helps grasp not just what BPD is, but more fundamentally, why it shows up the way it does in adulthood.
Right, the why. So, with that why in mind, let's dig into the foundational ideas. Our sources highlight a core concept right away. The personality in BPD is differentiated, it's distinct, but it's not fully individuated. Think of it like, well, the person isn't totally out of touch with reality, like in psychosis, but they struggle to form a consistent, stable sense of who they are or who other people are. It's like those internal pictures just keep shifting, breaking apart.
Exactly. And on an emotional level, BPD often reflects experiences from what's called the obstinate age. So imagine the emotional world of a, say, 2 to 3-year-old playing out.
Wow. Okay, so to map this journey, we're using object relations theory, which is this powerful framework explaining how we develop a unified mental image of the world through relationships we internalize.
And object relations theory, it lets us dive deeper into why someone might maintain what the source calls an experiential limit between different worlds. Between their real experiences and imagined ones, for instance. It gives us a model for understanding and treating these disorders. This theory basically sees development as a trajectory, cradle to grave. And when there are stagnations or regressions back to earlier stages, maybe organic causes, but often psychosocial ones.
Like difficult relationships.
Precisely. That's where conditions like BPD can emerge. And while there are various treatments, psychodynamic approaches are scientifically proven for BPD. The central idea really is about completing that unfinished growth.
Unfinished growth.
Yeah.
That leads us right into the earliest chapters, doesn't it? We need to talk about Margaret Mahler's work, Psychological Birth of the Human Infant. She outlines specific developmental phases like critical milestones for personality, and our sources are clear. Disruptions or regressions in these phases. They can be directly linked to mental health issues later, especially when you factor in unhealthy relationships or trauma.
Key psychosocial contributors, yeah.
So let's start right at the beginning. The autistic phase, 0 to 2 months. At this point, the infant doesn't really have interpersonal relationships in the way we think of them. They're almost like a biological reflex machine.
Yeah.
Can't separate itself from world, just reacting to, hunger, comfort.
The neural pathways aren't even fully myelinated yet in the cortex, and the psychopathology linked here is quite stark. A child stuck in this phase is described as literally incapable of separating a person from an object. Like, they wouldn't distinguish a nurturing hand from a soft blanket. It's all just stimulus.
That really sets the stage, doesn't it, for how reality is even perceived.
Absolutely. Then we move into the symbiotic phase, roughly 2 to 6 months. This is marked by the smile reaction. It suggests a kind of tentative awareness of satisfying interaction, but it's still this blurred experience. Mother and child are like one entity, a continuous flow where needs are met. Soothing care, getting needs met consistently, that's absolutely vital here.
And if that gets disrupted,
Well, the potential psychopathology is serious. Things like psychoses, manic depressive states. Where internal and external reality get deeply confused, it could lead to hallucinations, paranoia, that kind of fundamental break.
okay, now we're getting to a really critical period for understanding BPD specifically, the separation individuation phase. This spans from 6 months all the way to 36 months, 3 years old, and Mahler breaks it down.
Right, into 3 subphases. It gets really interesting here.
First is the hatching phase, 6 to maybe 24 months. This is when the baby starts to really differentiate from the mother, more alert, goal-oriented, pulling hair, putting food in their own mouth intentionally. They start distinguishing parents from others, get that stranger reaction. And mobility crawling helps push this exploration.
That burgeoning independence.
Exactly. Then comes a practicing phase, around 10 to 16 months. Mobility really kicks in here, walking. And there's this amazing almost intoxicating sense of omnipotence, like they're invincible with their new skills, often totally unaware of dangers.
Yeah, the world is their oyster, and mom is the safe harbor, the home base.
So what happens if that home base isn't reliable, or if parents don't manage that impulsivity? Our sources say regression or disruption here. It can be linked to developing manic disorders later.
That's the connection made, yes. And that leads us right into the rapprochement phase, 16 to 24 months. This one is just profoundly central for BPD.
Why this one specifically?
Because this is when the toddler starts to grasp their limitations. That feeling of omnipotence crashes down. They realize how dependent they are on the mother, and they start fearing her loss intensely. They learn to say no, asserting their separateness. But their world, even their view of themselves, splits into all good or all bad. There's no gray area yet.
The black and white thinking we see.
Exactly. The mother becomes even more important. She often tries to ease separation anxiety, bedtime stories, transitional objects like teddy bears. And this whole period culminates in initial individuation and achieving object constancy, usually by 24 to 36 months. Object constancy is huge. It means the child can hold a stable mental image of the mother or others, even when they're not there. It's the foundation for loving, grieving, empathy, putting yourself in someone else's shoes. Even early gender identity starts forming.
Okay, so connect the dots for us. What does this mean for BPD?
Well, from the object relations view, BPD is fundamentally tied to dominant features of that rapprochement phase showing up in the adult personality. It's like the person is emotionally stuck in some key aspects of being a toddler, grappling with that intense push-pull of wanting independence but fearing abandonment, because they never fully achieve that solid object constancy.
So they can't hold on to a stable image of themselves or others. Like someone can be all good one minute, all bad the next.
Precisely. That's the splitting. And it manifests as identity confusion, that intense fear of abandonment, negativity, defiance, impulsivity. Also, disturbances in time perception, chronic feelings of emptiness, and just this deep inability to internalize a consistent sense of self or others. And the sources add, this often underlies self-destructiveness, inappropriate rage, substance abuse, chaotic or violent relationships, often stemming directly from early trauma that basically stunted that healthy growth process right in its tracks.
Right. Okay, so moving past toddlerhood, we get to the Oedipal phase, roughly 3 to 6 years old. This is where a tentative gender identity forms, and a more complex mental image of self and others develops.
Yes, exactly. Kids at this stage can hold mental images better when separated. They can recall caregivers when lonely. They become more aware of anatomical differences, start developing gender identity in terms of roles, values. Boys imagining being Superman, girls being princesses, identifying more with the same-sex parent.
And how does this phase impact later life?
It's significant. For boys, it's about learning their smallness, their dependency, but also identifying with the father to sort of access his perceived power or characteristics. If there are traumatic experiences or, let's say, significant inadequacies during this stage, it can lead to weaknesses in gender identity, neurotic issues later on.
Like what kind of issues?
Feelings of inferiority, maybe. Or if a mother consistently invalidates the father's masculinity, or maybe a father invalidates a girl's budding femininity. These unresolved Oedipal struggles can definitely pop up in adulthood. You might see it in how people deal with authority, their relationship patterns, self-esteem. And for BPD specifically, the sources talk about a kind of chaotic self threatening the genuine self. Pathological internalizations from these early stages prevent healthy self-development.
It makes sense how these stages build. But let's talk environment. What causes these derailments? The sources really point the finger at inadequate and distorted parenting.
That's often the primary factor identified, yes.
We often see chaotic homes, right? Lack of security, maybe violence, substance abuse, just unpredictability. One source even noted almost half the female BPD patients studied were victims of incest. That's staggering.
It is, but it's not always that overt.
Right, there's a more subtle dynamic too, families that look normal outside. But inside, parents have this extensive inability to handle emotions, especially aggression. They might impart really distorted emotional meanings onto the child, maybe overvaluing achievements, grades, sports, while missing the emotional core.
That's a crucial distinction. The real issue is often the parent's inability to truly understand the child's needs, a profound lack of empathy. The relationship gets dictated by the parent's needs, not the child's. So the child is constantly invalidated, made to feel worthless, maybe even abused emotionally.
And there's that quote from the source.
Yeah.
It's chilling.
It really is. It captures this devastating dynamic. You exist for me. I'm not here to provide for you, but you must provide for me and are not entitled to anything of your own. You must be a parent for me, not the other way around. And you must also assume other roles serving my needs as I express them.
Wow. Just, wow. So the child is forced into these roles.
Yeah, roles like the scapegoat, the perpetual failure, or they become the carrier of the parent's chaos. They simply can't develop a healthy personality in that atmosphere of fear and threat. There's a powerful example in the source, a mother who self-harmed. Her daughter later developed chaotic behavior, also self-harmed. She'd been forced into this psychodrama, witnessing trauma like her father assaulting her mother, which then led the daughter into her own relationships with violent men, experiencing sexual abuse herself. It's a tragic cycle.
The impact is just immense. The
Yes.
child can't get genuine feedback on their real emotions, their real aims. And this leads to what the sources call the false robot self,
A persona developed at the cost of the true self.
which stays underdeveloped, just ravaged by shame, guilt, anger, worthlessness. And that chaotic self emerges this mix of pathological roles, threats, unmet needs, leading the person with BPD to manipulate others, sometimes idealizing destructiveness. It sounds like surviving by playing a part you never auditioned for.
And what's truly devastating is that genuine individuation just doesn't happen. Instead, you get these cocooned, dissociated, traumatic states at the core. The person then compulsively repeats these traumatic pasts, these unmet needs. They can't grow beyond them easily. But understanding these deep roots, I mean, this is where knowledge becomes powerful, right? It allows for much more effective treatment.
So speaking of treatment, what's the goal then, according to the sources?
The aim is essentially to restart that halted development, to help the patient's personality resume its growth.
So increase their psychosocial skills, get rid of those pathological roles,
Yeah.
help the real personality develop.
Exactly. Therapy is geared towards helping the patient finally individuate, achieve age-appropriate development. And it's built on collaboration, understanding that chaotic self without actually feeding its unhealthy needs, guiding them towards growth.
What a journey we've covered. From that early symbiotic blur through those critical individuation phases and seeing the profound, often hidden impact of parenting dynamics, you really see how the foundations of personality get shaped.
Yeah.
And sometimes, yeah, deeply challenged. Understanding these developmental roots gives such an aha moment about BPD's complexity. It's so much more than just a label.
Absolutely.
It really comes back to that core insight,
Hmm.
the false robot self-developing, because the true self couldn't due to those distorted, often traumatic early interactions.
And if we connect this to the bigger picture, what further questions does this raise for you about how profoundly these early relationships shape not just individuals, but how they might even ripple through generations? This raises an important question. How can we collectively better prioritize and nurture healthy developmental environments for everyone's well-being, really looking forward?